Meantime, the free speech battle taking center stage in Texas, Republican Governor Greg Abbott pushing for a bill that would prevent social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter from canceling conservative speech. Let's get the read from attorney Leeza Garber. By the way, Facebook had no comment for us on this story, and we're still waiting to hear back from Twitter. Leeza, what do you make of it? We're seeing these states now take a stand.
Hi, Charles. So good to see you. It's been too long. And Texas's approach right now is a creative one. It's certainly something that other states are looking into, this kind of proactive legislation to look into how Facebook and other social media platforms are moderating their users and moderating content. It all comes back to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which is a piece of legislation that's now almost 30 years old. And it provides this broad shield against liability for having the social media platforms be able to moderate as they see fit and not be held liable for what users post. The problem is, and this is something we see often in technology, the law simply doesn't move as fast as the technology does, so it's lagging behind. And that's why states are looking to pick up what it's leaving behind. And it's also, President Biden is also saying there need to be changes. Pelosi has said there need to be changes. So it's coming from many, many areas.
Yeah, and obviously 30 years ago, these laws could not anticipate the sort of reach and power. These companies have become de facto the public square, and it's everyone agrees it's time to do something. And yet, isn't it ironic that more recently it feels like they've actually flaunted their disdain from conservatives, no longer trying to hide it, no longer saying the right things in press releases. They have taken a lot of people off the platform. Google last week removed 100,000 people who had negative reviews of Robinhood. I mean, they're taking it upon themselves to actively police their platforms, and they're not policing it in favor of conservatives.
The problem is inherently with the legislation that exists, these platforms can do as they see fit. They are allowed to create their own rules and they govern themselves. What's interesting is that Zuckerberg of Facebook said as recently as early this month that they want rules, they want better legislation, they want to have less responsibility in terms of dictating what they're supposed to do in terms of moderation. But so far, we're just seeing piecemeal steps. We've seen broad claims that Section 230 helped create the internet almost 30 years ago with 26 little words because it provided this freedom. But now we see major political figures really pushing for better legislation, more specific legislation to take into account the billions of users that are on these platforms.
Yeah, but I think we all have to be careful after, Congress said they'd take steps against banks and Wall Street. What we saw were no banks. We went years without any new banks. Same thing with oil. The only ones who are going to win are big oil. Whenever they take these steps, they ironically built a moat against these powerful companies, and they have no true competition. Is there a legal argument that says, okay, Parler, can't compete, certainly doesn't have the bandwidth to compete. There's no true alternatives. Should that create a greater sense of urgency from lawmakers to take some action here?
There should be a greater sense of urgency because of all these issues that have come up all at once. You see the deplatforming of major figures. You see questions of free speech, even though free speech doesn't really apply because these are private platforms, private companies. But in general, definitely there should be a push for a review of this legislation because we have to remember there are simply mere mortals behind the moderation of these platforms. We have lawyers, we have HR executives, but why are they the ones that are allowed to say who's allowed to do what on these platforms? So we need better legislation.
Well, we say the plot thickens. We'll see, Leeza. By the way, folks, Neil's back tomorrow. You can catch